All right, I will.
It's underneath your seat. Right underneath. Yes, sure. You should drink it.
Hello, how are you? Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. I got lost.
So,
You won't believe it. Is it on? Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. There's another club quarters on
Yes.
45th Street.
yes,
I didn't realize.
I did the same thing.
Really good one.
Yeah.
That's the nicer one.
Well, this one's great. This one's got all the cool people in it. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you're on.
Thank you very much. Mr. Farnaz.
Okay, we'll get things started. Hi, I'm Patricia Kranz. I'm the Executive Director of the Overseas Press Club. Welcome, everybody. I'll just say a few words about the Overseas Press Club and we'll get started. We're celebrating our 80th anniversary this year, which is very exciting. It was started in 1939 on the eve of World War II, when Hitler was on the march, by foreign correspondents who wanted to come home and have a place to get together with their compatriots. So we're proud of that long history. And last week we had the annual awards dinner where we gave out 21 awards to people who cover news outside of the U.S. for an American audience, and it was a very, very moving event. And a few years ago, Jason was there because one of the things we do at the event is light a candle of remembrance for journalists who've been imprisoned or killed or otherwise persecuted. And so we were very grateful to Jason to come a few years ago, right after he came home. And I have to do one promo out there on the table if you didn't see it. On May 9th, we're having a program to reminisce and ponder the Tiananmen Square events 30 years later. And it goes from 12:30 to 7. You can go to the lunch program and stay, or you can just go to parts. And I encourage everybody who's interested to get one of the flyers out there. It lists the participants, and there's foreign correspondents who covered it, at least 2, if not 3 survivors, Chinese students who survived, who are also going to speak. So it will be a timely and great event. So on to tonight. We're very lucky to have Jason and Farnaz Fassihi, and I will introduce Farnaz and then she can introduce Jason. So Farnaz, like Jason, is Iranian American, and she now covers diplomacy at the UN and foreign policy after 14 years in the Middle East as a correspondent. She's won numerous awards, including 2 OPC awards. We always know who's the best. And she's an author of a book on the Iraq War, Waiting for an Ordinary Day. So, thank you.
Thank you for coming, and it's great to see my friend Jason sitting here with me, a free man. Jason Rezaian is a global opinion writer for the Washington Post and an analyst for CNN, and the author of the excellent book, The Prisoner. I met Jason in 2009 in Iran in the midst of the protests and the demonstrations contesting the presidential election then. And he was a freelancer then, and we talked about the perils of reporting on Iran and being dual nationals. Jason stayed in Iran, as many of us were forced to leave, and offered unique perspective, and went on to write for the Washington Post from there, and subsequently was in prison, detained. He is the longest American or foreign journalist who was held in Iran. Before I ask him, I'll prelude this with saying that, like Jason, I know personally the personal cost and professional costs of being a dual national and covering a country that can brand you a spy. I left Iran under a direct threat from the judiciary and the intelligence ministry, and later I was told that my arrest warrant had been issued and I had just left for the airport before they could nab me. Soon before Jason was, I think, sentenced, they came out in all the newspapers and said that I was a spy, and that the Wall Street Journal was a spy den. They called it the headquarters for the media espionage of the West. So we both share the pain of being outcast by a country that we love and we care about. And with that, Jason, I'd like to open it up by asking you, when I read your book, the thing that impressed me most, aside from the terrible ordeal that you've been through, was the fact that you had managed to stay so sober in your analysis and keep a journalistic distance, and still in your writing for the Post, I see that. A lot of journalists who leave turn into opposition activists. And I want to ask you how you managed to do that.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the introduction, Farnaz. Thank you for the question. Hi to friends who I haven't seen in a long time. Look, it's I think the advantage or maybe attribute that I always brought to my work on Iran that I've tried to maintain in the face of a pretty horrific in some ways situation. And I went through this long ordeal in prison, but all around me there were other people, other prisoners. I only ever interacted with two of them, two cellmates that I had. I never saw anybody else. But I knew that my cell was very close to the Evin Prison execution square, where they hung people. And if you know much about Iran's judicial system, you know that they execute more people per capita than any other country in the world. So that was a very stark reminder for me that I was pretty lucky. The two cellmates that I had, one had spent 3 years in the same section of Evin Prison that I was in. They call it 2A, which belongs to the Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's the only section of the prison that has no oversight from the parliament or the judiciary or other elements of the government. It's what we would call here a black ops site. They can do whatever they want there. This man has been in there for 3 years without any legal representation, without trial. And so on that score, I was in much better shape than he. The first day that I came out of solitary confinement, I spent 49 days in solitary, and I thought to myself, wow, that must be some kind of world record. Later I read books that told me otherwise. But the person that I was being released from solitary with was also coming out of solitary, and he had been there 10 days longer than me. And he was from Azerbaijan, the country right around, right across the border from Iran. Didn't speak a word of Farsi, didn't speak a word of English. So on those two scores, I was in better shape than he was too. So, for me, it was always a matter of looking around and saying, okay, could be worse. Literally, it can always be worse. And when I came out in 2016, I knew I had a choice. I had several choices. One was to do, as you said, become an opposition voice. Two was to kind of give up completely on Iran, potentially on journalism entirely. Three, keep doing what I knew how to do. And that seemed like the right choice for me. I feel like I have a different sort of perspective on things. than I did before and that other people do, and one that is not easily discounted. I feel like, I'm in a pretty good position to continue to write about what's happening in Iran and what's happening to Iran in terms of US policy. And so that's what I've tried to do.
When they arrested you, did you think that this was because of any particular work that you had done? Because you opened your book by saying that you had made it a point to write about features and write stories that reporters normally wouldn't be writing to show another side of Iran.
Yeah.
Were you surprised? Did you feel like they had made a deliberate decision to nab you as a bargaining chip, or was it because of the journalistic work that you've done?
It took time to realize that I was taken as leverage or bargaining chip. I don't like the term pawn. I feel, a little bit more valuable than that. I don't play chess, but I tell people all the time, at least call me the horse. I didn't have the awareness of the situation until some weeks and months into it. And initially, you were thrust into a confusing state and told all sorts of crazy things that could happen to you, accusations that make no sense. You're in solitary confinement. You don't have anybody to confide in. So it's just more than anything a jarring experience right off the bat, and one where you very quickly sort of devolve into being a little more than a caged animal, right? And that's what they're going for. So I wasn't in a position to really think critically, why did this happen? But as time went on and the more conversations that I had with my interrogators, I started to realize, okay, this is not because of any article that I wrote. This is because I am an American citizen working for a high-profile American news organization. And the people that took me wanted to do something audacious. And this was a domestic play inside of Iran before it was something that they wanted to leverage with the United States. It was an internal problem. It was a shot at Rouhani and his administration, an attempt to scuttle nuclear negotiations before they could succeed. And frankly, Rouhani and Zarif didn't play ball. They weren't going to worry about it. They had bigger problems. And I think I became first a piece of a domestic spat, and then part of a geopolitical international sort of state.
Well, Iran's always played this dual game of we're not, especially the government, Rouhani and Zarif, but it's not us, it's the Revolutionary Guards. Because when they came out with the spying charges against me, their UN mission, told me, we're very sorry, it's not us, it's the guards, and they could say the same thing about Mr. Zarif, as they do about you. So did you feel like as your family was trying to secure your release, as the Post was trying to secure your release, or even the American administration, were they talking to the people that could make that decision to release you?
I don't think so. I think that they were talking, and anybody who's Iranian in the room, or has Iranian friends, or has bought a Persian rug at any point, there are middlemen in any transaction. You might walk into a rug shop and see a rug that you just have to have, and it turns out it doesn't belong to the guy who's trying to sell it to you. And that's the sort of situation that I found myself in, where I was being held by the Revolutionary Guard and being negotiated over by the Foreign Ministry and the Intelligence Ministry, who are at direct odds with the Revolutionary Guard in their domestic dealings. So that's pretty precarious. And it took 14 months. And I think on the final night, when I was released, I don't think that the Revolutionary Guard people that had possession of me really aware of the details of the deal that was made to release me. And I kind of recount that in the second to last chapter of the book. But it was, you know, it was plain to me that they were learning things in real time too.
Jason, it's always hard to come back from extreme situations to normal life. You came from solitary confinement and torture and abuse and imprisonment. What was it like coming back home and, learning to be a regular citizen again?
I'm still learning. I'm 3 years and about 3 months into being free, and I was only held for a year and a half. But you know, there's still aspects of my brain chemistry and experience in the world that are very different than they were before all of this happened to me. I think the first couple of months were very hard in that you want to be happy, you want to feel, you know you should feel very lucky, free, but you know, from the first night of freedom, first I went to a military base in Germany where I got medical treatment, and then we were brought back to the US. The Post was very nice to send Yegi and I on a short second honeymoon to Key West. The Post was opening up their new newsroom. So they would open up a new newsroom in Washington at the beginning of February. It was going to be this kind of big grand opening and unveiling, and John Kerry was going to give a speech, and they asked me if I would take part in that, and I said, sure, I'd love to take part in that. I just don't want to hang out in snowy DC for 5 days. Can I go somewhere warm? And they sent us to Key West. And it was the first night my wife decided that she was tired because we'd been a crazy ordeal for a year and a half. She wanted some sleep. And I decided to venture out and go have some dinner in a restaurant. And they put a menu in front of me. And I had to make choices. And this was really the first time I had, you know, the opportunity to make a choice for myself in a year and a half. And as much as I had longed for that moment, it wasn't that easy. Do I want this or do I want that?
What did you order?
I went to a sushi place, and I
No
told
sushi in Evin?
no sushi. I told them that I wanted anything with tuna and avocado. That was what I wanted. So they brought me a bunch of rolls that had tuna and avocado. And I said, another one of those, and a beer, and another beer. I slept really well that night.
We all take risks, and I think for dual nationals covering their other country, the risks are more grave. And people, I think we go and nobody forces you to go into these places, but nobody really also talks about the post-traumatic stress.
No.
I'll share something personal. When after all these years of covering wars, I still can't walk in a public space with ear sets on. I have to be hyper alert of every sound I hear and conversation. I can't be on mute. So what was the PTSD like for you coming back from that experience?
So I was kept, as I said, first in solitary, and then with only one other person. There were two different people, but one at a time. So being in a room like this with a lot of people, or any place that had a lot of people, was very jarring. Multiple conversations going on, very confusing, disorienting. I had a hard time in cars. I get car sick for the first few weeks after my release because I had lived a year and a half without horizons, right? Just big walls around me. And I come from just north of San Francisco. And for anybody that's been out there, the roads are pretty windy, So I found myself in Mill Valley, if any of y'all know where that is. My brother had rented a little Airbnb for my wife and I, and I had to walk everywhere. People will want to take me places and show up. No, I'm just gonna walk. So I didn't get very far, And I guess it was good in its way, but sleep was hard. I still have nightmares from time to time. The nightmares are always exactly the same. It's it's very, I can see it in front of me right now. I'm back in a version of my prison cell, usually with my cellmate from Azerbaijan, and I was supposed to get out and I didn't. So, and if you read the book, and those last 40 or 50 pages, you'll know why I might have that kind of fear that's still in the back of my mind.
Given everything you've been through, do you still think it's worth it to take these kind of risks as a journalist? If a young reporter comes to you and says, I want to go cover Iran, what would you say?
Somebody, I did a talk at NYU Law School yesterday, and somebody asked me the same thing. He asked me, specifically about doing foreign correspondence work, or human rights work, or legal work in harsh international environments. I'm the last person in the world that's going to tell you not to do that. If it's something that you want to do, at the same time, you have to know the risks associated. And I think while I never expected that what happened to me would happen, but I always accepted it as a possibility. I think anybody that works in Iran as a journalist, as a dual national, has to have had thought about that. I mean, there's too many stories in the last decade or so, people like us, not so different, and actually, in fact, people that we know that end up spending long stretches of time in prison. I just didn't expect to break everybody's record, spend more time in prison than everybody else. And also, I didn't think it was going to happen when it did. By that point in my time of living in Iran, I'd been there for over 5 years. Farnaz talked about when we first met in 2009. That was the most tumultuous time in the post-revolutionary history for journalists, for sure. We were all told to leave, some of us more politely than others. I left for a few months. I came back and I stayed. And those were dark days. The second term of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was not a happy time in Iran. It was difficult. And I thought that I'd survive the worst. But I wouldn't undo anything on it.
Me neither. Jason, we're in an interesting and dangerous time in Iran-U.S. relations with an administration that is taking a hardline view of the regime in Iran. They just sanctioned the Revolutionary Guards and branded them as a terrorist organization. There are a number of American and dual national detainees in prisons in Iran. Where do you see Iran-U.S. relations going? And what about the fate of our friends who are in prison?
Yeah, I want to say that there's nowhere to go but up, but I know that it can always get worse, unfortunately. We're in a pretty bad state right now. I went this morning to an event that Foreign Minister Zarif had at Asia Society, and for the first time ever, first time ever publicly, he said on the issue of Americans being detained there, let's make a deal. Let's exchange. Let's have a swap.
They've said that before. They said we're open to negotiations. He said a
Today
swap.
he said,
Let's make a
he
swap.
said 6 months ago, we reached out to the U.S. government. They said no. If they say otherwise, they're lying. We're ready to exchange people. Let's just do it. It's out there as clear as day. And I think that was the attitude for a very long period of time. It's obviously the attitude in my case, right? But they never said it so forcefully and so publicly. And to me, that acknowledgement in such a public way means that there's some desperation. And I don't think that desperation is we are worried that our system is about to crumble. It's let's do the best we can to avoid a confrontation. And in my view, he was signaling to the Trump administration that he wants to talk. And I think if you look at the Trump administration, there is not a singular policy on it. it's a multi-pronged, several different attitudes. And I think if you were to take a three-man poll of President Trump, his national security advisor, and his Secretary of State, each one of them would have a very different idea of what they think our Iran policy should be and what it is. And that scares the crap out of me. So I think we're in a bad spot. I think the likelihood of kind of stumbling into confrontation, I never know what that means when people say that, but the possibility of something really bad happening that is avoidable seems higher right now than it did 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago.
To me, sometimes it feels like the months before or the year before the Iraq War, having covered that war.
Yeah.
And I think you and I both talked about this, that although we're both victims of the Iranian regime, and we don't like what they do, but we still don't want Iran to turn into another Iraq or Syria, which is why I think it's important to offer a sober analysis.
Right.
And so do you feel like the administration values your perspective? Do they seek it?
Not often. Every once in a while, on very specific issues, I'll be asked to take part in a roundtable. And if they're looking at me as maybe a devil's advocate on certain issues, I don't see them implementing anything that I have to say. And that's fine. I mean, that's their prerogative. It's not my job. But I can't be silent about what I perceive as big mistakes that they make. And, I think ultimately, we hear a lot from this administration that they want to free Iran for the Iranian people. And I've heard that story before in a lot of different countries.
Well, we ban you from entering the US and sanction you.
Exactly. While we take hundreds of thousands of your male citizens who were forced to do their military service in a particular branch of the government, and now because they did that military service in the IRGC, are ostensibly terror suspects in the eyes of the United States of America. People that if you're Iranian, you definitely know somebody who did his mandatory military service.
It's the luck of the draw.
It's
in Iran.
total luck of the draw.
So you could be placed by lottery in the IRGC for your draft. Yeah.
And then, we've also criminalized, being an Iranian citizen generally in the sense that you're barred from entering the United States of America. We've taken the incredible step of not barring, but forcing European citizens who've been to Iran to go get a visa to come to the United States of America. I mean, we are criminalizing contact with that country. And, in 2002, 2003, I think that there is the case to be made that the Bush administration was ignorant because there was a lack of access to human intelligence on Iran. We don't have that here. And, a million Iranians living in this country, maybe more. And a good number of them, I don't claim to know the statistic, but at least a couple 100,000 of them come back and forth every single year. We know plenty about what life in Iran is like, what's good about it, what's bad about it, what's working, what's not working, how sanctions affect people, how educated people are. We know everything we need to know. And essentially, we've taken all of that and said, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to consider that. These people are bad, they're dangerous, and we gotta get rid of them. And I ultimately, there's a evangelical kind of through line in our foreign policy these days, and I for one don't think that there's too many people in high office right now that are worried about people of my background, whether they are Shia or Sunni or Jewish. There's a very small number of born-again Christians in Iran, and I guess they're worried about that. The rest of us are going to hell.
What do you think is gonna happen to the Americans in Iran? Do you think that they will actually exchange them? Do you think the Trump administration will see signs?
I think if what Foreign Minister Zarif said today was true, that he had made those offers to the US and that they've been either ignored or rejected, somebody's got lost blame. You know, because the State Department has been saying that, you know, we don't have the ability to bring them home. We will bring them home, we just can't right now. And I worry that this administration has been pretty successful bringing American citizens home from a variety of countries that we have tough relations with. North Korea, Venezuela. I'm not gonna say we have adversarial relations with Turkey, but we don't have great relations with Turkey right now. And for some reason, we can't bring people back from Iran. And I wonder if it's not, you know, politically expedient for this administration to have Americans languishing in Iran.
Have you heard anybody from the Iranian administration, any reaction to your book or to your talks?
I don't think they like it. But, you know, so I went to this event this morning and they kind of gave me a question, which was, I think, to be expected. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think surprisingly, there hasn't been a huge propaganda splash about my book, although from time to time I still get talked about on state news as sort of the architect of the infiltration and influence operations. You're part of that too, probably. So, you know, I don't think that they're, if they have a reaction, they're not sure.
Should we open it up for questions?
Yeah.
I have to break in. For purposes of the videotape and streaming, please use the microphone.
Hi, I'm Alan Dodds, Franco, former president of this club, and fascinated by your reporting from both of you for years. This is really a simple, complicated question. Do the Ayatollahs run Iran, or does the Revolutionary Guard, do the Revolutionary Guards run the Ayatollahs?
I mean, I think that they're all part of the same big family. And, you know, there's plenty of Ayatollahs in the Revolutionary Guards, and there's plenty of Revolutionary Guardsmen in the Ayatollahs. So it's not, I don't think we can kind of separate them out. I don't think we can separate, you know, Foreign Minister Zarif and President Rouhani out from the equation either. This is one political institution, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and all of its representatives that are currently involved in running the country, their number one priority is the preservation and continuation of this system. And on that score, I don't think that it needs to be parsed out in any kind of way. I think the Revolutionary Guard, as an entity, has taken over massive control of construction projects, oil projects, and so they wield a lot of wealth, but they're not separate from the supreme leader in any way. It's all part of the same thing.
But I feel like they are stronger. I mean, the Islamic Republic started out as a clerical regime
Right.
with Rome the center of power, and it has evolved into more of a military regime, right? I mean, I do think that the guards are very powerful now, and I think without the guards, it'd be impossible for the regime to maintain its hold.
In the gate,
Like even from Khamenei to the supreme leader.
For sure,
They're the ones that are holding it together.
and what was her game in Syria?
Their game in Syria. Well, Syria served as a sort of a gateway to Lebanon, to the Israeli border, and it was their main ally allied ally in the Middle East. I think that they saw losing Syria as a huge blow. They thought that it would be followed by freezing access to Hezbollah and us not being a major threat or a major power in the Middle East and being able to sort of directly threat Israel from that border.
Yeah, you got that.
Yes,
Hi, Evelyn Leopold, correspondent at the United Nations down the hall from Farnaz. Can you tell us more about the release, how you found out about it and
Yeah.
how it went? And also, what your crystal ball say about Mr. Zarif's proposal this morning in the
Yeah.
General Assembly? Did you speak to him at all?
No, he
Yes.
won't speak to me. I don't think he'll speak to me. I'm not getting Christmas cards from her.
Neither am I. They send New York cards to every reporter at
Yeah.
the UN except me.
I used to get them with his signature, and then that stopped. Which is fine. It's okay. Save this. What was the first part of the question about my release? So about 10 days before I was released, my interrogators came to me and said that I was being released in a swap. And I didn't believe them because they had told me so many conflicting things in the year and a half leading up to that. They told me that they were going to execute me. They told me I was going to spend the rest of my life in prison. They told me that I would have my limbs cut off. They told me that my wife and I would never see each other again. They also told me that you're going to be released within a matter of hours. You're going to be reunited with your wife. You're going to go back to your life here in Tehran as if nothing ever happened, right? So it was very hard to put any stock into what they had to say. But they explained the situation, and I told them, if this is true, I have a scheduled family visit with my mother and my wife tomorrow. You're going to come back and tell us together everything that you just told me here. And they did that. So, and it was an incredible meeting. I read about it in the book because my wife and my mom just were irate, And at one point, the lead interrogator says, we know that you don't think Jason's done anything wrong, and we're pretty convinced he hasn't done anything wrong either. But just think of this year and a half as if he was doing his military service. And,
They didn't say you were on vacation.
right, exactly. They said that earlier.
Or retreat.
Yeah, silent meditation. So, it was obvious what they were trying to do. They were trying to do damage control before my release, and trying to kind of compel me to be quiet. And I was very quiet for a long time. It wasn't because anybody told me to. It was because I had an incredible story that I wanted to tell and wasn't ready to do it yet. But yeah, that was an interesting couple of weeks when I didn't get much rest because I was so confused and just trying to read the tea leaves without thinking of how to do so. I didn't see his comments at the assembly. I just saw him at Asia House this morning. What else did he say?
I have to check again.
Um,
No, I just was curious, what's your crystal ball say about a prisoner exchange?
I mean, it will happen. When is the question? And, it's been 3 years since I was released. A couple of people that are still in prison now were in prison when I was in prison. They weren't released with me. And I feel very terribly for their families and them that it seems as though they've been mostly left behind for the last couple of years. And if a process can be kickstarted to bring them home, I think that would be great. I think what would be great following that is a way to deter Iran ever from taking hostages again. Because for whatever reason, they've been doing it for 40 years and they haven't stopped. And as somebody who's been a victim of that and knows the impact that it has on my whole family and extended relations, it's really incredibly destructive. I just, I think about this and I talk about it sometimes. What they did to me was not personal, right? I fit a prescription of what they thought they needed. But the damage inflicted on my psyche, family, it couldn't be one person. Strange dichotomy, but it's very, it's just the, ultimate in bullying behavior that nobody should have.
Okay.
Hi.
You get the next one.
I'm Shabnam. I'm just an average American, Iranian American citizen. And I'm very happy about the ending of your story, and I'm very proud to know her and to have your voices out on Twitter and people that I can trust and listen to and follow. And I'm just wondering, I know it's really early, but as far as the 2020 field goes, do you have any hope with anybody being a little bit more pro-Iran and taking us away from this bad path that America's been on?
I mean, I think that the terror designation makes things tough, but most of the Democratic candidates have said that they'd get back into the JCPOA almost immediately. And the members of Congress that I talk to say the same thing. What I worry more about is the long-term hit to American credibility and how we're going to undo that. And obviously, people living in the United States can look at the last 2+ years and think about a lot of ways our credibility has been hurt. But on this particular score that you and I happen to care a lot about, I just think that when the United States of America signs on to a deal, the world should be able to look at it and say, okay, they're going to live by that. And I don't think that that's the case right now.
As Farnaz knows, Jason and I had one very brief meeting in Tehran in 2014.
Right before I was arrested, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was very taken with your description there of the initial days of your arrest. It was exactly how I saw it. So everyone knows, I was at that time the Deputy Bureau Chief of Agence France Presse in Tehran. I had just arrived. For anyone that doesn't know, Reuters does not have foreign press in Iran. The Associated Press does not have foreign reporters in Iran. The only foreign news agency that had foreign nationals in the country at that time was AFP. And I had met Jason at a press conference, which are big events in Iran. It was a press conference of the President, Hassan Rouhani. Because again, what people won't understand is in Iran, you can't just phone up the State Department. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
There is one foreign ministry briefing, if you're lucky, weekly, where you get just a little bit of an insight into what's going on in one ministry.
And no questions from foreigners.
Exactly, no questions from foreigners ever. You have to basically, have to piecemeal everything else, and it's like a chessboard. You have to move the pieces around and try and work out what your angle of attack is going to be. But anyway, going back to the point, coming to my question, but the description is relevant to your answer. I remember exactly when you were arrested, and I remember the very first press reports that came out. It came out in Vatan Emrouz, which is a daily newspaper run by an ally of the former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, which detailed in fairly, which you're obviously very familiar with, unflattering terms, the spying charges against you. We, as a foreign news agency, had made our own inquiries, and it's exactly as you said. We were told by Ershad, which is the Ministry of, shall we say, it's not a short description, the Ministry of Islamic culture, culture and Islamic guidance, who control the activities of foreign reporters in Iran. We had been told, oh, it's okay, it's a mistake, this will be sorted out soon.
Yeah.
So the culture was exactly as you thought yourself, this is a mistake, we'll get this sorted out, because the precedents were kind of like maybe a couple of months, something like that. Obviously it didn't happen. Things started to deepen, things started to darken. But again, it's very pertinent for everyone. It was a domestic scenario at the time.
Yeah.
Someone decided we're going to make a move, and this guy will be helpful. And I think it's one of the deep tragedies and ironies of your incarceration is that you were incarcerated the entire time of the negotiations that led to what was a remarkable breakthrough in diplomacy. And I just really wondered, while you were incarcerated, did you have any indication at all of all the negotiations that were going on, or were you completely in the dark? Because we have various reports that you had been deprived access to any journals or everything. I just really wondered how it was.
So I had, in those first 7 weeks that I was in solitary confinement, access to nothing. And that is a terrible place to be. Right? You have no frame of reference on anything, and the one thing that was continually driven home was that I didn't have the right to ask questions. I had no idea what was going on in the world or in negotiations. But when I came out of solitary, the cell that I was put into had TV. And it had TV, like Iranian state television. It wasn't like I was getting Netflix. Or CNN or Fox or anything like that. It was the whole kind of buffet of Iranian state channels. So I had Press TV. I had the IRIB, all the different channels. And a week or two after I was put in that cell was when the UNGA happened here in New York. And as you may know, that's the time of year that Rouhanians or powder their noses and put on their best dancing shoes and come to New York and do what they do. And the state media, it was odd. They were showing raw footage from those various events that Rouhanians were doing. And one of them was a roundtable that they did with news execs. And there's no voiceover, there's nothing. It's just raw footage. I can imagine the average Iranian tuning into this is like, what is this, right? And I'm fascinated. I'm sitting there watching questions about the negotiations. And then my boss gets up and asks a question about me and my wife. And so that was the first indication for me that, okay, something is being done on our case. As the time went on, I watched those negotiations closely. And I learned a lot about how the Islamic Republic, power structure viewed those negotiations. It was really important for them, but it was also something that they needed to remain skeptical publicly. And I consumed hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of their media coverage, and dozens of hours about me, right? And the first time that you see footage of a member of parliament calling for your execution, it's pretty disconcerting. But then the second or third time that you realize, these are just responses to things that are going on in the rest of the world. Good things that are being said, right? So, I didn't have access to all that was being said and written about me, obviously. But when my wife and my mom could come and see me, they would pass along notes of information, not actual, handwritten notes, but with information. And so I was able to form a bit of a worldview of what was going on. And I knew, as anybody who was covering Iran knew, before I was arrested, that the writing was on the wall. This deal was going to happen. Both sides wanted it to happen. Just a matter of time, right? And I told my captors this all the time. I said, you guys think that by taking me, you can make a dent in this. I don't matter. And nothing matters. Your power structure, going back to your question about the IRGC, they wanted this deal not to happen. The part of it that had control of me. The Supreme Leader had decided that it was going to happen. With other parts of the IRGC and Rouhani and others. And the Obama administration decided it was going to happen. So, yeah, I had some insight and the ability to see it from an Iranian angle, and I learned how to be a conscientious consumer of Iranian state propaganda.
I was just going to follow up there because
Yeah.
I think it's a really important point you make. There were people who didn't think it was going to happen, but there was. The stakes were too high for failure for both sides, which was why those of us with a slightly, there were legacy correspondents and all sorts of people who said, oh, this is never going to happen. And I said, I think if you look at the facts, it looks pretty obvious it's going to happen. And it did happen. It took longer than we thought, but it did happen. However, again, given especially your knowledge before and here, how damaging is it, given that it took almost 40 years for there to be any direct negotiations between Iran's top establishment figures and America's diplomats? Given that happened, given there was always that lack of trust, but given it happened and there was a deal that during, never mind after the election, during the campaign for the election, which was ongoing only months after the implementation of the deal, Trump made a speech at AIPAC saying, I'm going to tear up the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah.
It fatally undermined any chance of diplomatic traction and throughput. How damaging do you think that is? Not only now, but going forward, because again, if you sign a deal with someone
Right.
and they pull out, why would you do a deal with them again?
I don't think it's, I think it's incredibly damaging, but not fatally so. Because, Zarif is still here saying we want to sit down and talk, right? And I think that sort of plays to Trump's instincts, right? He wants to talk too. He's got this whole
photo op.
He wants a photo op, but he wants a whole bunch of things, right? But he doesn't want to be held back. And then people say, well, sir, don't, you can't talk to them, they're evil, right? They say, well, you know what, I was laundering money with them not too long ago. I can't believe that story didn't get more traction. Yeah. So, I think all bets are off in a certain way, but I don't think that the prospects are good in the short term. And I think, there will be a crisis in Iran, before too long, the Supreme Leader dies, and things will change. Things are always changing.
Both sides are trying to gauge each other, I think.
Yeah.
We've gone from Trump saying, I really want to sit down with Iranians, to tweeting Rouhani's a lovely man right before the GA. I think the Iranian, and I think that the families of the current American detainees told me that the administration told them we've reached out to Iran 8 times to talk about prisoners, and Iranians have not replied. So it's very good news that Zarif's actually now making this initiative.
Well, but what he said today was that 6 months ago, we reached out to them, and if they said that didn't happen, they're lying.
Yeah.
So, this is kind of,
Small signals.
but I think that ultimately there won't be a war, and I think that there will be negotiations. I just don't know when. I don't know what they'll be over.
Hi, my name is Hava Pasha. I'm a friend of Farnaz.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for being here. My question is actually posed to both of you, since you're both kind of persona non grata in Iran. And I wanted to hear more about your interaction with Zarif today. Did he ever confront you today, acknowledge you in any sense? And I'll get them all through. And have either of you ever requested a sit-down interview with him? And lastly, I know that it's probably not been long enough for you, Jason, but would you ever consider going back to Iran, given that your wife is Iranian, you're Iranian American, your wife is full on Iranian, and also Farnaz, since that, I guess, arrest warrant is out for you.
I think we'll all go back to Iran one day. I
In
just
the
don't know when.
10-year timeframe?
I'm not gonna put a number on it. Could be next month, it could be 20 years from now.
Has anyone asked you to go?
Nobody's asked me to go. A lot of people have told me not to. And I respect that request. What was the first part?
Zari.
Zari.
Oh, yeah.
So somebody got up, a journalist got up at the end of the event. He answered a few questions from cards, and this journalist stood up and said, Jason Rezaian is in the room. Do you have anything to say to him? And Zarif answered that I spent many sleepless nights trying to get Jason and his wife out of Iran, and with the current people being held in Iran, I'm not the problem. Don't take it to me, take it to Washington. That's exactly what he said. So, it was a very opportunistic way to basically say, I took care of that guy, and I can take care of these other people too. I don't, I purposely did not want to engage because I didn't want to upset myself, right? I was just there as a witness. I've reached out asking for interviews, not officially because I don't like rejection, but I've been told they don't want. I hope that changes.
It's a little different for me, although
It's on.
I can't go to Iran, but I've continued to cover Iran, and despite their best attempts to block me from that because of the support of my newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, they've had to deal with me. So I have sat down with Mr. Zarif. In fact, I'm sitting down with him tomorrow morning. And I get invited to press conferences with President Rouhani when he's in town. So I continue to do my job. They don't always answer my emails or respond to me, and they don't send me New Year cards, but they know that no matter what they do, I still write about Iran. So at some point they have to decide. I hope that one day I go back to Iran. It's not a risk that I'm going to take right now, given I've been explicitly told that you won't make it home from the airport. My grandmother was sick a while back, and I went to them saying, I don't want to go as a journalist. Please let me go. I'm going to tear up for just a few days to see her. And they said, you can take your own risk, but our advice is you won't get home to see your grandma. So, and I didn't. She passed away.
Oh.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Keegan, and I'm not press, and what I am is a veterans advocate. And because of the work that I do as a veterans advocate, I am very familiar with a lot of the people that you are very familiar with. I'm actually going to the Austin Tice night in Washington next week.
Everybody should do that. Maybe second, look it up online. Austin Tice is a journalist who's being held in Syria for the last 6.5 years. The National Press Club is working with restaurants around the U.S. To raise money for a FBI reward, but more than that, raise awareness about his case because
It's so important.
it's incredibly unfortunate, sad, and not well known enough.
Right.
Sorry.
So anyway, the question that I have for you, you kind of got me going before. My son served 8 years in the Army. He came home from 26 months in Kandahar with PTSD. He actually died the month you came home. And I just want to know how you and your family are, because coming home alive is not necessarily as wonderful as you would think it would be. And to see, my mother's heart is really warmed by the fact that you are here to talk to us. But I know it's hard, and I know your whole family must really be struggling.
First and foremost, really sad.
Thank you.
It hasn't been easy, and it has had an effect on our family relationships. But it's pretty normal. People don't realize that, but it is normal when you think you've been separated from your loved one for a long period of time, your loved ones. And there's a lot of expectations from everybody on each other. And there's that gap of time where you aren't able to fulfill your familial expectations because of no fault of your own, right? I will say this, my core people are my wife, my mom, and my big brother. And we are spread out across the country. My wife and I are in Washington, my brother's in San Francisco area, my mom lives in Ohio. In the early months, I wanted to spend as much time with everybody as possible, but there's friction, it's hard. Now, I've come to the conclusion that it's better and more important to spend quality time than massive quantity of time. And, we still get agitated with each other from time to time, but I make it a point to tell both my mom and my brother, how much I care about them, how much I appreciate them, how much I appreciate everything they did for me. My wife and I are together all the time, and I tell her that, many thousands of times every day. So, but it's not hard. Excuse me, it's not easy. It's incredibly hard. And, it took me several months to get to the point where I really accepted that it wasn't going to be an immediate recovery. I spoke with David Rode. He had worked with my boss, the Post's foreign editor, Doug Gell, at the Times. And even before I was released, David had reached out to Doug and said, whenever Jason comes out, I'll be here as a resource. And when I first got out, Doug told me that a week or so after I came out. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what this person could do for me. And after about 6-7 weeks of being out and not being able to sleep and not being able to understand why I wasn't happier, I picked up the phone and I called him. And he told me a couple of things. And at some point in the conversation, I'm thinking to myself, this guy knows what I'm talking about. It's like the first person I've dealt with that knows what I'm talking about. At some point he laughed and said, I feel like I'm talking to myself 7 years ago. And I slept that night, for the first time. Knowing that there was other people out there who could relate to me. He's become a wonderful friend of ours. And I've done the best that I can to make myself available for other people and families who are going through something similar. But you figure it out as you go. And, I try to be easy on myself.
That's it, that's
Yeah.
hard.
I wanted to say I'm sorry that
Oh, thank you.
as well, having both covered Afghanistan and Iraq wars.
Thank you.
I think maybe we have 2 more questions and there's time for Jason to sign some books.
Hi, my name is Farnaz. Thank you for coming. I think we talked a lot about the restrictions on reporting on Iran and how hard it is, obviously, as you both have experienced. But with the kind of same hardliners that are making similar remarks that were made before the war in Iraq, how do we avoid as journalists in the coverage of Iran and what's actually happening and what are facts and what is just commentary on Fox News to avoid going into the same situation journalists face leading up to the Iraq war?
I mean, going back to something that I said early on, I think we have so much more access to decent information on Iran than we did on Iraq in 2003. Human access, people that know the terrain, journalists who have worked there. And I think it will be an uphill battle to try and cultivate a war with them. I wouldn't put it past them, right? But I mean, I think it's not going to be an easy sell. And I also don't think it would be an easy sell with the rest of the world, Not that Iraq is an easy sell, but everybody's selling the line, and that's not gonna happen. Right? So, you know,
And I
it's,
think that Iraq also, the Iraq memory is still alive for
Yeah,
journalists
most-
at least and commentators, they bring it up.
I'm more concerned about the toll that, you know, US policy is gonna have on Iranians inside the country. At a moment when we could be doing things to empower them, right? And there are ways to empower civil society in Iran, we're not doing anything.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, she stole my question to some extent, you know,
Let's go, come on.
which was, you know, what do you think the chances of Trump and Netanyahu will get together and attack Iran?
I mean, I think that there's.
And is that what they want? What do they want?
So as I said earlier, I think that Trump, Pompeo, Bolton all want different things. If it was, you know, if you're asking me what both Bolton, Netanyahu, and MBS want, you know, I think pretty clear what they want. They want to see destruction, you know. They want to see Iran torn apart at the seams and maybe cut up into multiple pieces. And I know that there are plenty of opposition groups in Iran or outside of the country, but, you know, representing different factions of people in Iran, telling them that that's completely feasible. I just don't think that it is.
You know, and a lot of misguided opposition voices saying that, oh, Iran won't be like Syria, Iran won't be like Iraq, that Iranians are educated and it'll be an easy transition of power. And we've seen that the dynamics in the region are just not as such. And wherever you've had a power void and security void, you've had terrorist groups pop up or come in and sectarian wars, and Iran will be much worse. And that is a genuine fear.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Jason and Farnaz.